First time I saw the little bottle of hydrogen peroxide under his bathroom sink, I thought it was normal. Then I woke up to a dark red stain on his expensive white sheets, and I stayed quiet while something in me cracked, because the way he stared at it felt like a verdict. I'm Lorelai, 26, and I work as a patient coordinator at a physical therapy clinic. I talk to people in pain all day. I keep my voice calm. I solve problems before they explode. I thought that skill would protect me when I moved in with my boyfriend. His name is Knox. He's 29. He works in software and speaks in lists, like life is a series of tasks to complete. He also liked to say my place even after my name went on the lease. I noticed it the way you notice a tiny rock in your shoe. It doesn't stop you from walking, but it makes every step feel off. When we moved in together, almost everything in the apartment was his. His couch, his kitchen set, his bed, and especially his bed, which he treated like a museum exhibit. He bought those crisp hotel white sheets that look good in pictures and make you feel guilty for being human. I'm not messy. I'm the kind of person who wipes the counter as I cook. I fold laundry the same day I wash it. So at first, living with Knox felt easy. We had a rhythm. He liked things neat. I liked things calm. He'd kiss my forehead when I lined up the pantry and call me adorable, like I was a helpful accessory. Then came a week when I was running on fumes. Work was understaffed. The clinic's printer kept dying. A patient yelled at me because I couldn't change an insurance policy with my smile. By the time I got home, my body felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else. That night, my period was on what I thought was a lighter day. I'd been on birth control for a while, and most months it was predictable. Knox knew I was on it. He knew I was bleeding. He also had no problem with the idea of it when it benefited him. On one of the earlier nights, he'd pulled a towel from the closet with this casual confidence, like it proved he was mature. He'd smirked and said, "See, I'm not one of those guys who gets weird about it." I remember staring at him for a second, trying to translate what he thought he was saying, as if my body needed his approval to exist, as if he deserved a medal for tolerating something I didn't choose. Still, I let it go. I was tired. I wanted peace more than I wanted to argue. On the night everything changed, I showered, put on my soft cotton pajamas, and crawled into bed with him. I didn't put on anything extra because my cramps had eased and my flow felt light, and honestly, I wanted to feel comfortable in my own skin for one night. I wanted to sleep without straps and adhesive, and that constant awareness that my body was being managed. Knox kissed me, told me goodnight, and turned off the lamp. The room went dark except for the faint blue light from his phone screen. He scrolled for a while. Then he rolled over and fell asleep like a switch flipped. Sometime in the early morning, I woke up with that sinking feeling. If you know, you know. It's not pain. It's a warm, slow certainty. I stayed very still, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. I slipped out of bed quietly and went to the bathroom. When I looked at my underwear, my stomach dropped. I cleaned up, my cheeks burning even though I was alone. Then I stood there for a moment, hands on the sink, staring at myself in the mirror like I was about to walk back into a courtroom. I found a pad, put it on, and returned to the bedroom as carefully as if the floorboards might report me. Knox was still asleep. His breathing was steady. I lifted the blanket and saw it. A spot on his white sheet about the size of a coin, darker in the center. My first thought wasn't disgust. It was dread, because I already knew how he was going to react. When morning finally arrived, Knox stretched like he'd had the best rest of his life. He rolled toward me, tried to pull me in, and then his hand touched the sheet near the stain. He froze. His eyes moved to the spot like it was a spider. "What is that?" he said, and his voice was flat in the worst way. I swallowed. I think I leaked a little. He sat up slowly, as if standing too fast might make the stain spread. "You knew you were on your period." "I did," I said, keeping my tone gentle. I thought it was light. He stared at me like I'd said something offensive. "So you just went to sleep with nothing?" I could feel heat crawling up my neck. I was wearing pajamas. I just didn't think I needed anything else. Knox threw the blanket back like it had betrayed him. "That is so irresponsible, Lorelai." The word hit harder than I expected. Irresponsible. Like I'd crashed his car. Like I'd broken a rule everyone knew. "I can wash them," I said quickly. "Cold water. I'll treat it right now." He didn't move. He didn't even look at me anymore. He looked at the sheets like they were ruined forever. "Those are expensive." My mouth opened, then closed. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Waiting for him to remember that I was a person he claimed to love. He didn't. "You need to replace them," he said. "I don't want to sleep on that." I was so embarrassed I could barely breathe. "Knox, it's blood. It comes out." He shook his head once, sharp. "It's unhygienic." That word made something in me go cold. Not anger yet. Not even hurt. Just a quiet surgical clarity. I stood up without arguing. I walked to the laundry room, stripped the sheets, and started the wash exactly the way I knew would work. I used cold water. I treated the stain. I added the stain remover we kept for coffee spills and pasta sauce. I did all of it with steady hands, like I was performing a ritual. Knox hovered in the doorway like a supervisor. "You should have been more careful," he said, and I could hear the disgust he was trying to disguise as logic. "This is my bed." I paused for a second with the detergent cap in my hand. My bed, his bed, our apartment, his apartment. The little rock in my shoe turned into a sharp stone. I turned my face slightly so he couldn't see what I was feeling. "Okay," I said. That was it. One word. Calm, soft, no fight. He blinked like he'd expected me to apologize harder. "Okay, I understand," I said. "I'll handle it." He relaxed. I watched his shoulders drop as if he'd won something. That should have been the end. A stain, a wash, a lesson, but Knox needed to be right, and he needed me to feel small for it. Later that afternoon, he brought it up again while I was chopping vegetables for dinner. "I talked to my sister," he said casually, like he was mentioning the weather. I kept my eyes on the cutting board. "Okay, she said you're supposed to wear something to bed. Like always. She said it's common sense." I felt the knife pause against the wood. "Your sister said that?" "Yeah," he said. "And she's a woman, so she would know." I slowly set the knife down. My hands were still, but inside my chest something twisted. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't ask if I was okay. He outsourced my body to his sister, like I was a problem he needed a female opinion to solve. I turned and looked at him. "Did you tell her you asked me to pay for new sheets?" He shrugged. "I told her the situation." "The situation," I repeated, tasting how cold that sounded. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm just saying you can't expect me to be comfortable with that." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him comfort was a privilege, not a right. I wanted to remind him how many nights I'd cleaned up his messes without making him feel disgusting. How many times I'd washed towels, underwear, sheets, and never once acted like his body was a contamination event. Instead, I nodded once. "You're right," I said softly. His eyebrows lifted. "Please." "Thank you." That night, the sheets came out of the wash spotless. Perfect. White again. Like nothing happened. I held them up in front of him. "See? Clean." Knox stared at them, suspicious. Like cleanliness had to be proven. "I still don't like it," he said. I folded the sheets neatly. "I know." And right there, in that moment, I decided something very specific. I wasn't going to argue with him about periods. I wasn't going to beg him to respect my body. I wasn't going to raise my voice so he could tell everyone later that I was emotional. I was going to listen. Because men like Knox always say the quiet part eventually. They get comfortable. They get careless. They confess without realizing they're confessing. The next morning, while Knox was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand with a preview message. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't even touching it. The screen was just bright enough for me to read a line as I walked past. His sister's name popped up, and underneath it was a sentence that made my stomach sink. So what did you do? Did you make her pay you back for ruining your sheets? I stopped walking. My hand hovered in the air, not touching the phone, not crossing a line, but suddenly I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just about a stain. This was about power, about control, about him telling another person that I ruined something, like my body was a reckless animal he was stuck cleaning up after. Knox came out of the bathroom humming, towel around his waist, hair damp. He glanced at me. You good? I forced my face into calm. Yeah, I said, I'm good. He smiled like he believed me. Then he picked up his phone and walked into the kitchen, typing. I stood in the bedroom alone, staring at the freshly made bed, the perfect white sheets, the spotless surface that looked innocent. And I finally knew what question I needed answered, the one I'd been avoiding since the moment I saw that hydrogen peroxide. What else had Knox been telling people about me while I stayed quiet? Hold on, tiny real life pause. I read the comments when I'm worn out, and seeing your location reminds me I'm not telling these stories into an empty room. Like, subscribe and drop your city, state, or country. All right, now let me take you back. That afternoon, Knox invited friends over for a game night. It was supposed to be fun. Pizza, drinks, laughing, normal couple stuff. I played my role perfectly. I smiled, I offered plates. I laughed at the right moments. And I watched Knox the way you watch someone when you finally accept they are not who they pretended to be. At one point, I walked past the hallway and heard his voice in the bedroom. The door was half closed. His tone was low, confident, like he was telling a funny story. Bro, I swear, Knox said, and I heard a couple of the guys chuckle. I woke up and there was blood on my sheets. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I stood still, my fingers gripping the edge of the wall. My face stayed calm. My heart didn't. One of his friends said, dude, you made her clean it, right? Knox laughed. Clean it. I told her she owes me new ones. Those sheets were expensive. Someone whistled. Another laugh. And Knox, like he couldn't help himself, added the line that turned my embarrassment into certainty. I'm not sleeping on used sheets after that. That's nasty. I didn't step into the room. I didn't confront him. I didn't make a scene. I just walked back to the living room with the same quiet smile on my face. And I poured drinks like my hands weren't shaking. Because now I had what I needed. Not a stain proof. I set the bottle down gently on the coffee table and kept my smile smooth, even though my stomach felt like it was full of broken glass. The living room was crowded with Knox's friends, their shoes on his rug, their laughter bouncing off the walls like this apartment belonged to them more than it belonged to me. Knox walked out of the bedroom a minute later, still grinning, still holding his drink like he'd just delivered a punchline. He didn't look guilty. He looked proud, like humiliating me was a form of bonding. I watched him from across the room and thought, so this is what you do when I'm not listening. You turn me into a story. I didn't confront him. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't slam a door. I just nodded along when someone said the pizza was late, and I brought napkins, and I let Knox get comfortable. That was the plan now. Let him get comfortable enough to keep talking. Because men like him don't stop at one ugly comment. They keep going. They add details. They exaggerate. They dig the hole deeper for themselves and call it confidence. Later, when everyone was louder and the game was messy and the room smelled like beer and pepperoni, Knox slipped into the kitchen behind me. He put his hands on my waist like nothing had happened, like he hadn't called me nasty in our bedroom. You're being quiet tonight, he said into my ear. I forced a small laugh. Just tired. He kissed my cheek. It should have felt sweet. It felt like ownership. You good though? He asked, and there was a warning in his tone, hidden under the concern. The way someone checks a box. The way someone makes sure their problem is still manageable. I nodded. I'm good. His shoulders relaxed again. He leaned back against the counter and watched me clean a spill someone had made. He watched like he liked this version of me. Quiet, helpful, contained. Then his phone buzzed on the counter next to him. He glanced down and smirked. My sister, he said. She's still mad about the sheets. My fingers tightened around the paper towel. I kept wiping. Yeah? Knox chuckled. She said, I'm too nice. Too nice. The words almost made me laugh, but it would have come out sharp, so I swallowed it. What did you tell her? I asked, like I was curious, like it didn't matter. He shrugged. Just that you didn't think you needed anything. She was like, no way. She said you should be paying for it, because if it was her boyfriend, she'd be furious. I nodded slowly. Makes sense. Knox studied me. See, even she agrees. Even she agrees, like I'd been on trial, like my body was a mistake, and he needed witnesses. I turned the faucet on and rinsed my hands for too long, letting the water drown out my thoughts. Behind me, Knox went back to the living room, satisfied. He didn't notice how calm I was, or how my calm wasn't surrender. When the night finally ended, and the last friend stumbled out with a loud goodbye, Knox locked the door and stretched. Fun night, he said. Yeah, I answered. He walked past me toward the bedroom, already taking his shirt off. Come to bed. I followed him because I needed to see what he'd do next. I needed to know how deep this went. Knox pulled back the sheets and paused like he was checking for evidence. The sheets were spotless, white, clean. He exhaled like he was relieved. I just hate thinking about it. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him. About what? He frowned. You know, blood, it's gross. I kept my face neutral. You don't think it's gross when we have sex? He rolled his eyes like I was being difficult. That's different. That's like controlled. There's a towel. It's not on my stuff. My stuff. My stuff. My bed. My apartment. My sheets. My rules. I nodded again, slow. You're right. It's different. Knox smiled, satisfied. He climbed into bed and turned on his side, already ready to sleep. Within minutes, his breathing deepened. I lay there next to him in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling something settle inside me. Not rage, not panic, something colder. I wasn't going to spend my life begging a man to respect the normal function of my body. And I wasn't going to stay with a man who turned my humiliation into entertainment. But I also wasn't going to leave like a ghost and let him tell everyone. I overreacted. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative. So I reached for my phone and opened my notes. I didn't type emotions. I typed facts. I wrote down what he said. The exact words, the time, the context. I wrote down the moment in the hallway, the laughter, the line about used sheets, the way he said nasty like he was tasting it. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I turned on the voice memo app and tested it with the microphone covered by my palm. I wasn't recording him sleeping. I wasn't recording private moments. I wasn't setting traps for random conversations. I was preparing for the next time he tried to publicly humiliate me, because I knew there would be a next time. The next morning, Knox acted like like everything was normal. He kissed me goodbye, told me he had meetings, and reminded me that the building maintenance was coming later to check the air filter. He said it like it was his decision, his schedule, his apartment. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and stared at the lease papers we'd signed. My name was there. Legally, clearly, not as a guest, not as a pet, as a tenant. Knox liked to say my place, but legally it wasn't only his. That mattered. I called my best friend on my lunch break because I needed someone who knew me, someone who would cut through the fog. She answered on the first ring. Hey, you okay? I swallowed. No. She went quiet in the way real friends do when something is wrong. What happened? I told her everything, but I told it calmly, like a report. I described the stain, the way he stared, the way he demanded new sheets, the way he called it unhygienic, the way he told his friends and laughed. When I finished, she didn't speak for a moment, and then she said, "You're not staying there." It wasn't a question. It wasn't advice. It was a truth she was handing me. I'm figuring it out, I said. No, she said firmer. You're leaving, and you're not leaving with your head down. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. I don't want drama. Then don't do drama, she said. Do paperwork. Paperwork. That word made me breathe easier. I understood paperwork. I lived in systems. I could do this without screaming. After work, I didn't go straight home. I went to the clinic's front desk printer and I printed copies of the lease. Then I printed the building's tenant rights page from the management portal. Then I printed a simple form I found online about removing yourself from a lease with proper notice, the kind of thing you could hand to a landlord without begging. When I got home, Knox was in the living room with his laptop, wearing headphones, typing like he was in control of everything. He looked up. Hey, I said. He pointed at the kitchen trash. Can you take that out later? It's getting full. I stared at him for a second and I almost laughed. He had no idea. He still thought I was the same quiet woman from last night, folding napkins while he joked about my body. Sure, I said softly. Knox smiled, already turning back to his screen. That evening, his sister called. I didn't answer at first. I watched the phone buzz, watched her name flash on the screen, watched it stop. Then she called again. Knox looked up. Answer it. She's probably just going to lecture you. My throat tightened. Why would she lecture me? He shrugged. She likes me. She'll tell you need to be more considerate. It's whatever. It's whatever. Like my humiliation was a family group chat topic. I picked up the phone and walked into the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind me. Then I answered. Hello, I said. His sister's voice was sharp right away. So are you paying him back? I didn't react. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the white sheets that had started this entire mess. Paying him back for what? I asked, sweet and calm. For his sheets, she said, like I was slow. You got blood on them. That's disgusting. He works hard for his things. I let a silence hang. Not because I didn't have words, because I wanted her to fill it. He told me you refused, she continued. He said you got defensive and acted like he was being dramatic. My stomach turned. There it was. The first real twist. Not just that he talked about it. He lied about my reaction. He turned me into the villain who didn't care. I kept my voice soft. That's what he told you. Yes, she snapped, because he's not going to make up something like that. I stared at the wall and felt my heart beat slow. Knox wasn't just careless. He was strategic. He was building a story where he was the reasonable one and I was the gross one. Can I ask you something? I said. She sighed. What? Did he tell you I washed them immediately? Cold water, stain remover, the whole thing. And they came out spotless. She hesitated just for a second. He said you tried, but he didn't want to sleep on them after that. So you believe the sheets are permanently contaminated, I said, still calm. Don't be smart, she snapped. It's about respect. Respect. That word made my jaw tighten. I agree, I said quietly. It is about respect. She paused again, suspicious now. So are you paying him back or not? I looked down at my hand on the comforter, my fingers pressing into the fabric like I could anchor myself. Yes, I said. Her tone changed instantly. Please. Good, finally. I let my voice stay even. Tell him I'll handle it. Then I ended the call. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat there for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of Knox typing in the other room. He thought he'd won. He thought I was finally falling in line. I walked out and handed him his phone. Your sister says hi. Knox smirked. Told you. I nodded and I picked up the trash bag like I was going to do exactly what he wanted. Then I carried it out to the dumpster. And while I stood there under the harsh parking lot light, I opened my bank app and moved money into a separate account Knox didn't know existed. Not a dramatic amount. Not something he'd notice. Just enough to breathe. When I went back upstairs, Knox was in the shower. His laptop was open on the coffee table, screen still awake. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen showed an open group chat with his friends. And right there in plain sight was a message from Knox posted earlier that day. Bro, she finally agreed to pay. I told you, they always cave. My vision narrowed. My mouth went dry. It wasn't just about sheets. It was a game. A script he'd used before. Like he'd been training people to see women as predictable, weak, manageable. I didn't touch the laptop. I didn't scroll. I didn't take his device. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the screen from a distance. The message visible, the timestamp visible, the name visible. Then I set my phone back in my pocket and sat down on the couch like I was waiting for a movie to start. Knox came out of the shower 10 minutes later, hair wet, face relaxed. You okay? He asked like he cared. I smiled. Yeah, I'm okay. He sat next to me and put an arm around my shoulders. Good. I don't like when things are tense. I leaned into him just enough to keep him comfortable. And inside my head, I repeated a single sentence like a promise. You wanted me to cave. Okay, I'll cave. Exactly the way you asked. Right before you realize you should have kept your mouth shut. You wanted me to cave. Okay, I'll cave. Exactly the way you asked. Right before you realize you should have kept your mouth shut. The next morning, I woke up before Knox, moved quietly through the apartment, and made coffee like everything was normal. I wore the same calm face I wore at work when a patient is yelling, and I'm mentally counting the minutes until I can step away. Knox came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, already half annoyed. You're up early, he said. I couldn't sleep, I replied. He opened the fridge and frowned at the shelf. Did we run out of creamer? We did, I said. He sighed like it was my fault. Add it to the list. I nodded. Sure. He stood there a second studying me. You're not mad anymore, right? About the sheets thing. I lifted my mug and met his eyes. No, I told you I'd handle it. The relief on his face was instant. That was the part that made my skin crawl. He didn't want partnership. He wanted compliance. Good, he said. Because I don't want to have to keep explaining basic stuff. Basic stuff. Like controlling a body he didn't live in. Like making a woman pay a penalty for being human. He grabbed his keys and leaned in to kiss me. I turned my cheek toward him and let it happen. Then he said almost casually, make sure you order the right ones. Same brand, same thread count. White. I smiled. Of course. When the door closed behind him, the apartment went silent. The kind of silence that feels like a room. Finally telling the truth. I didn't sit down. I didn't stare at the wall. I moved first. I opened the notes on my phone and added what he said in the kitchen. The exact words. Then I opened the photo I'd taken of the group chat message. I zoomed in until the text was crisp and undeniable. They always cave. I stared at that line until my eyes felt dry. cry. Then I took a breath and did what I do best. I followed the proof line. I called our building office and asked who I should speak to about changing a lease. My voice was polite, professional, calm. I didn't tell them drama. I told them logistics. I asked about notice periods, about removing a tenant, about how to make sure utilities and mail were properly handled. The woman on the phone gave me a simple answer. It would take paperwork and time, but it was possible. I thanked her like she'd just helped me schedule a dentist appointment. After that, I called my best friend again. I'm leaving, I said. Good. She answered immediately. When? Soon, I said. Quietly. She didn't ask for details. She understood. I can be there with my car. I don't want it to look like a scene, I said. I want it to look like a decision. It will, she promised. I ended the call and looked around the apartment. My clothes were in the closet. My makeup was in the bathroom. My shoes were lined up by the door. All the little signs of a shared life, but there were also signs I'd ignored. The way Knox corrected me when I said our couch. The way he moved my things to organize them. The way he asked, not if I could help, but told me what I needed to do. Like I was an employee in his home. I walked into the bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer on my side. My hand stopped for a moment over a tiny object I hadn't thought about in weeks. A spare key. Not the main key to the apartment. The building key that opened the pool gate and the laundry room. The kind of key Knox liked having control over. The kind he never stopped mentioning. Like access itself was a status symbol. I picked it up and slid it into my pocket. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and ordered him what he demanded. White sheets. Same brand. Same thread count. Same everything. And I used my card because I wanted the receipt. Not because I owed him. Because I wanted the final moment to be clean and undeniable. I wanted to take away his favorite weapon. The ability to tell people I was cheap, selfish, irresponsible. I paid for the sheets. Then I printed the receipt. I printed the lease paperwork too. I printed one more thing. A single page with a screenshot of his message. Clear, centered, no edits, no commentary. Just his words exactly as he typed them, with his name on top. I didn't decorate it. I didn't add accusations. I didn't write a speech. Facts speak louder when you don't try to make them scream. That afternoon, Knox's sister texted me. Did you order them yet? I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have argued. I could have explained my body. I could have written paragraphs about empathy and respect. Instead, I typed one sentence. Yes, I handled it. Then I attached the receipt. She replied almost instantly. Good. He deserves peace in his own home. His own home. I felt that same cold clarity again. She wasn't just defending him. She was validating the entire mindset. The one where a woman's presence is conditional. The one where a man's comfort is the default. So I did the quietest revenge I've ever done in my life. I replied with one more message. Before you keep defending him, I need you to see something. This is what he told his friends. Then I sent the screenshot photo of the group chat message. They always cave. No insult, no extra words, no explanation. Just the truth. The typing dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Minutes passed. I kept my phone face down on the table and packed a box with my books, my skincare, my favorite hoodie, and the small things that made me feel like myself. My phone buzzed again. What is this? Did he really say that? I picked it up and answered calmly. Yes? Another pause. Then she texted again. He told me you refused and got defensive. He said you were trying to make him feel bad. My throat tightened, but my hands stayed steady. Of course he said that. It fit his story. It made him the victim. I responded with one line. I washed the sheets immediately. They came out clean. He still demanded replacement and told people I was disgusting. Again, no anger, just the facts. For a long time, she didn't reply. When she finally did, the message was shorter than everything else. I need to talk to him. I stared at that sentence and felt something shift. Knox was about to lose one of his favorite shields. The woman he used as proof that he wasn't misogynistic. The female stamp of approval he waved around whenever he wanted to sound reasonable. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just kept packing. By early evening, my best friend arrived. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked softly, and I opened the door and let her in like she was a secret. We moved quickly, quietly, not frantic, not panicked, controlled. Boxes, bags, my coat, my personal documents, my laptop. The small things Knox would never notice were gone until he needed them. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. Not a fork, not a towel, not a hanger. I left the apartment looking exactly the way Knox liked it. Neat, clean, perfect. Because I didn't want him to have a single excuse to call me dramatic. While we carried the last box to the car, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Knox. Where are you? My heartbeat stayed steady. I typed back. Running errands. He responded immediately. Bring creamer and stop by the front desk. They said they need something signed. I stared at the message. They need something signed. He had no idea. He thought the building was calling him for maintenance or a package. He didn't know it was paperwork I'd already started. I texted back, okay, one word, calm, cooperative. Then I carried the last bag downstairs. When the car was loaded, I sat in the passenger seat and looked up at our balcony, at the window where the white sheets were probably still folded in the closet, at the place where I'd tried to make myself smaller to fit someone else's comfort. My best friend glanced at me. You sure? I'm sure, I said. We drove to her apartment first. I unloaded the essentials into her spare room. Then I drove back alone. Not because I wanted to see Knox, because I wanted to end it the way I chose. Clean, direct, unforgettable. When I walked into the apartment, it was quiet. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and cold coffee. I set my keys on the counter and placed a small package on the dining table. The new sheets had arrived faster than I expected. Perfect, white, expensive, exactly what he wanted. Next to the package, I laid the printed receipt. Then I placed the printed screenshot of his message on top. They always cave. I added the lease paperwork underneath with my sections highlighted and a note from the building office clipped to the front explaining the next steps for removing a tenant. Then I wrote Knox one final note. It was short. No insults, no begging, no apology. I wrote that I replaced the sheets like he demanded and that I would be following the proper process to remove myself from the lease. I wrote that my body is not unhygienic and that the way he spoke about me to his friends and his family changed how I see him permanently. I wrote that he can tell whatever story he wants, but he will have to tell it without me in the room, without my labor and without my silence. I signed it with my name. Then I left. I didn't block him yet. Not because I wanted to argue, but because I wanted to watch him realize he lost control. Knox got home later that night. I know because my phone lit up like fireworks. What the hell is this? Why would you send that to my sister? Are you serious? You can't just leave. This is my apartment too. You're overreacting. You're being petty. Then a few minutes later, the messages changed. Please answer. Can we talk? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and forwarded the building paperwork to the property manager with a calm note confirming my intent and asking for the earliest available appointment to complete the process. Professional, quiet, final. The next morning, Knox called again. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, his sister texted me. I'm sorry. That was it. 2 words that felt heavier than any paragraph. I stared at them, then I replied, thank you for seeing it. No more than that. Later that day, a mutual friend texted me too. One of the guys from game night. Hey, Knox is freaking out. I didn't realize he said those things. That was messed up. I felt my chest tighten, not with triumph, but with relief. The truth had reached the right people. Not because I screamed it, because I placed it down gently and let them pick it up themselves. Knox tried again that evening, but this time it wasn't anger. It was bargaining. I'll buy new sheets every month if that's what you want. I stared at the message for a long time before I answered. It was never about sheets. That was the only explanation he deserved. After that, the calls slowed. The texts became fewer. Then they stopped. A week later, I met with the property manager and signed the final documents. My name came off the lease cleanly. No drama, no courtroom, no shouting match. When I walked out of that office, the sun felt different, like my lungs finally had room. The last twist came a few days after that, when I opened my mailbox at my new address and found an envelope with no return name. Inside was the building key I'd taken from Knox's drawer. He'd mailed it to me. No note, no apology, just the key. A small, silent admission that he finally understood something he never wanted to understand. Access isn't love. I held the key in my palm for a moment. Then I walked to the trash and dropped it in without hesitating. I didn't keep a souvenir from a man who thought my humanity was a problem to manage. I kept my dignity instead, and that was the cleanest thing I've ever owned. Now I'm going to step out of the story for a second, just me talking to you. Here's the thing. People like that don't start with a big cruelty. They start with small control. A comment, a rule, a look that makes you feel dirty for existing. And if you stay quiet, they take that silence as permission. I learned that calm is not weakness. Calm can be a weapon, not the kind that hurts people for fun, the kind that protects you. When you don't argue, they get confident. They talk more. They show you who they really are. And the truth is, you don't need to win loud. You just need to exit clean. You need to remove your access, remove your labor, remove your body from their story. Because that's what control is. It's not love. It's not protection. It's ownership. If you're ever in a situation where someone makes you feel disgusting for being human, listen closely, not to what they say to your face. Listen to what they say when they think you can't hear. That's the real relationship. And when you finally see it, don't beg them to change. Don't perform pain for someone who enjoys it. Just take your peace back. Quietly, fully, forever.